Life with my wife begins, it wasn't supposed to end this way. I first met Amy at a pub across the street from our county courthouse. It was just past 5 and the courthouse had emptied. I saw the pub and thought I might run into some acquaintances and catch up. I did not immediately see anyone I knew and so looked toward the bar. You all know the situation. The bar was packed several drinkers deep. I was unsuccessfully trying to gain the attention of one of the servers when a girl sitting at one of the bar stools waved for me to come to her, using her arms to push her friends apart so that I could get next to her. I said girl, but I should have said woman, because this girl was packing a holster with a Glock 19 on her hip and the usual other police paraphernalia. As good-looking and frightening as she was, she got the attention of one of the servers. I ordered an IPA draft. I saw you in the courthouse. I assume that you are another one of those lawyers that frequent that building. It was hard to hear in the noise, and so I brought my face close to hers so that we could talk. Not really my area. My work is different and specialized, but I was here today to take care of a problem for one of the local nonprofits without charging anything. She smiled. So what is your specialized work? It is very secretive and something that I can only discuss over a dinner date with a beautiful woman. So I will never know. Maybe. Are you done for the day, and would you like to be the beautiful woman I take out to dinner? Are we being rather bold? I don't even know your name, you don't know mine, and you are asking me for a date. You might be someone who is already in a relationship. We can exchange names once we get to know each other better. But I am totally single, and what I see is a beautiful woman who seems to be single and packing a Gen 3 Glock 19. So I know that you can protect me if I take you out. You know your guns. Yes, although I usually deal with some bigger machinery. So how about we leave here and talk about guns, and maybe at the end we can exchange names. She looked directly at my eyes, thinking. She then stood up, turned to her friends and announced that she was leaving. Sure, Amy, and have fun, one of the other law enforcement guys said, while quickly taking out his phone and taking my picture. I actually surprised myself by how forward I was. I am not good or bad looking, just an average type. I like the opposite gender, but unfortunately, I am not successful in maintaining any relationships. Girls, and then women, seemed unattainable. I worked through college and law school and I studied hard. I never had the time and money to do a spring break or go skiing during Christmas holidays. With little free time and lacking attractiveness, dates were few and usually ended with a friendly hug without any suggestion of another one. Even now that I was a lawyer, I still had little time and had only a few relationships, all of which foundered by my girlfriend deciding to leave. I did not grieve because I did not feel totally comfortable with any of the women with whom I had spent time. The only women who seemed interested in me recently were those that seemed to more interested in my success than me. My perception was that women tended to gravitate to guys that were better looking or more exciting than I was. My work was sophisticated and challenging, but was not something that would chat about during cocktails. I have started to both fear and be wary of women, which resulted in a predestined spiral of anxieties which made relationships impossible. Yet here I was flirting, without any self-doubt or fear or anxieties, with an armed woman cop surrounded by armed men. Why did I do what I did, and why was I not at all fearful or anxious? We left the pub and I offered Amy a choice of places. She chose a steak place which was close enough that we could walk. We started exchanging some information about each other. Amy was county law enforcement and was working for her detective badge. She had her share of working long hours, including working nights. But she loved her work and was making a difference. She then asked what kind of legal work I did. I work for a law firm that has different groups. I then looked at her and smilingly said, if you heard of the military-industrial complex, it is me. I help clients with government contracts, dealing with Congress to support funding, handling legal issues, and even patent disputes. But it is all tied to defense sales. We continued talking during dinner, and I found that we had many common interests and similar views. One difference was that she was very local and had never traveled out of the country, while I had done a fair bit of world travel. The dinner was wonderful, but then Amy needed to get home because tomorrow was another working day. Can I call you? Perhaps we can go out again, I asked, fearing the worst. Give me your phone. She then entered her contact information. I will be working stakeout this weekend, but then Monday on I should hopefully be available. I did call her on Monday. Hi Amy, "This is Michael. Michael who?" she answered. It then dawned on me that Amy had given her contact information to me without ever having asked my name. I hoped that it portended something positive. "I am the person who forgot to properly introduce himself to you last time and is asking for the chance to do so now." She agreed to go out, and I picked her up at her apartment. Amy wore a simple sundress, but one that displayed her beautiful legs and showed just enough cleavage to make it enticing. We had a pleasant dinner, which was long and quiet since it was a Monday. Afterwards, we went for a walk around the local park. By the end of that second date, I wanted her to be the one. I asked, and she accepted another date. I earned only a brief hug as I dropped her off at home, but I was satisfied. We did go out on the third date, this time to a play by a local theater group. This led to a series of more dates as we continued to progress our relationship. We both had difficult schedules between the unpredictability of her police work and my business travels and other obligations. But we started to spend all of our common free time together. We did everything from picnics to hiking to kayaking to enjoying the music at a local brew pub while sipping our drinks and talking. Amy had come from what I would call a broken family. Both her father and mother had affairs, with both claiming to be revenge for the other's cheating. But they continued to live together in a pretended happy marriage. Neither of her parents could kick the other out of the house, and neither could afford to move out, and so they continued their marriage. Amy seemed ambivalent about her parents' apparent open marriage. She did not condemn, but instead worked to get away as soon as she could. Starting in her early teens, Amy had taken every job from babysitting to being a waitress to working at a store to both have her freedom and get out of the house. She did stay at home until she had finished her law enforcement associate degree at a local community college and then immediately leased an apartment as soon as she became a cop. She might not have had the education that I had, but she was bright and soaked up whatever new knowledge came her way. She was intrigued that I had studied abroad at the prestigious Sorbonne University in Paris and spoke French fluently. She would drop French phrases, such as "I love you so much and I want you." Although we never actually discussed it, we were exclusive. Our love life was quite good. Amy was more attractive and more expressive than any of my previous few relationships. We both enjoyed cuddling and hugging. Usually, Amy seemed to smile or laugh only when talking about something work-related. Otherwise, Amy was more serious and quieter than joyful. But she was tender, respectful, and happy to be with me, and professed her love. I was truly in love. After a couple months, when my apartment lease was expiring, I moved into her apartment. It was larger than my little apartment which I acquired when I first moved into the city and never found a good reason to upgrade. And Amy had a good deal on the lease, as the property owner thought it was helpful to have a cop on the premises. The two of us were comfortable with each other and started to talk about our future together. After 6 months, during one of our late-night conversations, Amy half-jokingly stated, "I want a husband, a house and children, and I was wondering why you had not yet applied for the lead role." I got the message. I bought a ring the next day and proposed. Surprisingly, Amy did not immediately accept the ring. "Michael, I love you and I was not joking when I said I want to be your wife forever and have a family and home with you. But I love my job and enjoy the camaraderie of the people I work with. I want to continue my police work. You know that includes night shifts and sometimes long hours, and you never know when something might happen. I also want to continue occasionally hanging out with my coworkers even as a married woman cop. If you are not just willing but happy for me to continue with my work and support me when we have children, then I will gladly marry you, to love you forever, and have your children. But I do not want any false assumptions or expectations or arguments in the future that I am dedicating too much time to my work or not enough time to being a homemaker or mother or anything else. I want you very much, but can you be truly happy with that kind of life and that sort of wife? My dear Amy, I want to spend the rest of my life with you, and I will happily accept you just the way you are," I answered. Amy then extended her finger for me to place the ring, upon which she hugged me. "Oh, Michael, I am so happy that we found each other. You may be the only person in the world who could accept me as is and love me. I love you so much, and I will make you happy." Married life, we wanted to get married while we had a common window open for a honeymoon, and so, rather than a big wedding, we married in a simple ceremony that included only our parents. I was over 30 and Amy was close to that age. So after a year, we agreed that Amy would stop taking her medication so that we could start a family. It did not take long. Amy missed her next period and stopped drinking anything but water or seltzer. Amy chose not to announce her pregnancy, so as to avoid having her fellow officers feel any need to treat her differently. Eventually, that was no longer possible between her frequent pregnancy-induced vomiting, refusal to drink, and, finally, her showing. Her precinct completely accommodated and supported Amy, but headquarters immediately placed her on desk and other non-stressful duties. Shortly after being removed from the field, the powers that be assigned Amy to a special newly created task force that was tracing a group of dangerous criminals that was operating in the surrounding areas. Amy occasionally had to do stakeouts, but most of her work involved computers, telephone calls, and meetings which were unlikely to turn physical. Amy regretted missing out on her old turf, but was also excited about her new assignment. She began to work very closely with the county district attorney, James Rodden, who had taken a personal interest in the project and wanted to make sure everything was done properly. The task force gradually expanded the geographical scope of its efforts, as other surrounding areas began to utilize the task force as an asset. About a month before her due date, Amy went on maternity leave. The last month of pregnancy is tough, but Amy took it well. She pushed herself to exercise as much as she could. I loved having Amy at home, despite the irritability that pregnancy produces, and started to shift myself to working remotely. I organized our living area to include my computer and dual screens and updated the apartment's internet service and security. I noticed that Amy was a bit bored being at home without her professional work. She would sometimes call her coworkers on the task force to just chat, which ended up with Amy providing some insight or advice. Many of those conversations were with the DA, Jim. In due course, Amy gave birth to our son that she named Michael Jr., or Little Mikey, as she referred to him. There were no complications, and we brought the baby home. We agreed that Amy would feed the baby until she got closer to returning to work, at which point we would switch to some combination of feeding, expressed milk, and formula. I shifted almost entirely to working remotely, and thus was able to support Amy post-pregnancy and to be with little Mikey. Amy immediately went into a training regime to return her body to pre-child shape, during which I took care of little Mikey. Amy had some bit of postpartum blues, but 6 weeks after birth, we were again enjoying our special moments together. Amy also continued to have her regular calls with Jim and others on the task force. She looked forward to returning to work full-time. While looking to getting back to work, she loved being with Mikey. Nursing or changing or playing with Mikey, Amy would look upon him, and one could almost visualize the love the two shared. Other than when on her exercise regime or talking with her task force colleagues, Amy would spend all her time with the little one or being a housewife. 4 months after little Mikey's birth, Amy returned to work on a part-time basis. She missed the challenges that her work presented her and wanted to resume her prior comradeships. Her body had returned to something close to her pre-pregnancy state, and if anything, being a mother might have actually helped round her favorably. Amy quickly extended her part-time work until she went full-time. With Amy's return to police work, I continued to work from home and became the main caretaker of little Mikey. It was hard, but I kept my legal work going and took care of the little one. Amy would continue to nurse the baby and spend time with him after she came home and on her off days, but childcare was mostly up to me. I did not mind because I loved the little one and enjoyed taking care of him despite his crying and diaper changes. With Amy's return to work, we started to share dinner responsibilities, which generally worked well as we would either cook dinner or order takeout, or occasionally the three of us would catch dinner at a local restaurant or diner. One evening, Amy was not eating that much. When I asked if anything was wrong, Amy said no, everything is fine. I just had a big lunch and can't eat that much now. Oh, big lunch? Who with? Jim took me to this new bistro for lunch, and we tried a bunch of different things, and I think we got carried away a bit in ordering. Just the two of you went to lunch. You do that a lot? Yes, we sometimes go off the reservation for lunch. Try some different restaurants. Experiment. I assume that you don't just talk about work at these lunches. We talk about work. We talk about current events. We talk about a lot of things. Amy then paused and added, "Oh, my darling, Are you concerned about me going out with a handsome, intelligent, friendly, and influential gentleman?" Amy then came to me and hugged me. "I actually enjoy that you are showing some jealousy, because that means you are interested in me. But be assured, honey, that you have nothing to worry about. You are my one and only, and I have no intention of replacing you. Good to hear. But I think that things would be better if you didn't have these private lunches. People might talk. Don't worry about it. Jim and I are just friends. I am a grown woman and can take care of myself." Amy then hugged me while patting my head. "We're just friends" is just another way of saying that Amy and Jim were bonding at some level. I had no reason to think that she and Jim would ever cross the line, but I still did not like them going together for private lunches. I did not want to deny Amy the opportunity to have friends or network or try new restaurants. But why could they not have lunch with others? Why could I not be her only male friend? After all, I was well-read and a good conversationalist, and I always enjoyed talking with Amy. Another thought occurred. When Amy placed her hand on my lap, was Amy checking out if I was feeling nervous about her being with another man like in some crazy stories that one finds on the internet? Intriguing what drove her to that action, but I quickly put that thought aside. I had no reason to suspect anything between Jim and Amy. Amy was always at work or at home, except for occasional outings with her fellow officers and these lunches with Jim. I thought our love life was great and getting better. After putting little Mikey to sleep, it was not unusual for Amy to put on something nice or attractive and then hug me in a clear signal that she wanted to strengthen our bond. I was not always able to respond. Amy would be happy from her challenging work and being surrounded by people, but I was tired from both taking care of Mikey and work, and sometimes had to work late into the night. Amy understood and never got upset, but would say something like, "I understand, honey. Let me know if I can do anything," while caressing my chest or my hands. After our conversation about lunches with Jim, Amy never volunteered anything about her work with Jim, although she did not hesitate in answering any of my questions and admitted that sometimes just the two of them went out to lunch when others were not available to join them. Life continued. Some weeks later, my mother called that my dad had a health issue and was hospitalized. Dad was generally fine and the initial prognosis was good. Mom then said that Dad had asked if I and little Mikey could visit with him. I discussed my mother's call with Amy to make sure she had no problems with my taking little Mikey on a trip and asked whether Amy might want to go with us. Amy had too many things going on at work, including a funeral and other appointments, for her to be able to go, but thought I should definitely visit my dad. Further, she would not be available to look after the baby, and hence it was a good idea for me to take Mikey with me as I could take care of him. We talked logistics and packed. Amy seemed a bit sad, but also looked forward to having some alone time. "Don't worry about me. I will miss you both terribly, but stay with your parents as long as you need to. Maybe I will be able to take some time off after your return so that you can catch a break after this." I left with little Mikey the next day. During the trip, I would call Amy early every morning. That was the most lively time for little Mikey. And I would put him on the phone with Amy as he cooed and made the sweet sounds that only babies can make. Amy would also call every early evening to check in and talk with Mikey before I put him to bed. Our conversations were fairly short because neither Amy nor I were talkative and I had Mikey to take care of. But all conversations ended with my saying "I love you," to which Amy responded, "I love you more." I ended up staying with my parents for almost a week. It was 2 days before Dad could go home, and then I had to spend time helping him and Mom when he returned. Plus, I didn't have time to travel since my legal work also kept me busy, so it was easier to stay with my parents than rush back home. Meanwhile, my mother adored little Mikey and helped me take care of him, which gave me more time to focus on work than I had at home. Also, Amy didn't urge us to come back, so I stayed where I was. Life changes then. Everything went wrong. On the 6th morning at my parents' place, I called Amy as usual. This time, during our call, I heard a lot of noise from her end of the phone. Amy then put the call on mute and came back after a short while to tell me that something was happening outside and she would call me later. I tried to end the call with my usual "I love you," but the call had already ended. I waited for Amy to call back, but there was no call. Later that day, I had a scheduled conference call with a defense contractor client in France. They had emailed me a few days before, asking me to accept a phone conference, and though the purpose of the call wasn't mentioned, it seemed urgent. So I postponed calling Amy and joined the conference call. After exchanging pleasantries and making small talk, we got down to business. The company had recently lost its chief legal officer due to COVID, and another staff member had been arrested for drunk driving, in addition to another one about to go on maternity leave. The company needed a new chief legal officer and thought I was the perfect fit. They were expanding into the United States military and believed it to be a great opportunity. They wanted someone experienced and capable of handling the Pentagon and overseeing the lobbyists working with the Armed Services Committees. I spoke French, had good connections, and they had enjoyed working with me. I would lead a decent team, earn a good salary with great benefits. The only downside was that I would have to move to France. We talked for a while, and I asked them to send their proposal in writing. My initial thought was that Amy would never agree to move to France, especially since she didn't speak the language and would have to leave her chosen career. Nevertheless, I wanted to explore the option of telecommuting with occasional visits to France. The company was willing to give me time to decide. I tried calling Amy again, but my calls went straight to voicemail. Later that day, I checked the news online like I usually do. And that's when my life changed. Several websites reported that the FBI had raided the home of James Rawdon, a local district attorney, and arrested him for participating in a bribery scheme to benefit private developers through eminent domain seizures. Moreover, the developers were mostly from China and had used funds linked to a Chinese government insider, so there were international implications. The news articles had videos embedded showing Jim being taken away in handcuffs by the FBI. While watching the video, I caught a glimpse of someone I didn't expect to see in the background. I downloaded all the videos and carefully reviewed the clips. Without a doubt, it was Amy quickly walking away from Jim's house. Why was Amy there? Was she involved in the arrest? She didn't look like she was part of the team. If she wasn't part of the arrest team, then why was she there in the early morning? Did the noise I heard during our phone call signify the FBI's arrival to arrest Jim? That would mean she was at Jim's home before the FBI showed up, and she wasn't expecting anyone. I hoped Amy would call me back, but there was only silence. I called Amy again, but my calls went unanswered. Finally, later in the afternoon, I received a text from Amy. It said, "A lot of things are happening here because of Jim's arrest. Be glad you're not here. We'll talk later when things settle down. Love you." Her message left me with more questions than answers. What needed to settle down before a husband and wife could talk? And why should I be glad? Could the FBI be investigating Amy because she had been working with Jim? Or could they be investigating her for being at Jim's house that morning? Why was she there? Why couldn't a wife talk to her husband to alleviate his natural concerns and questions? After that email, I didn't call Amy again, and she didn't call me. Mikey and I returned home that weekend. Amy wasn't at work and welcomed little Mikey and me with hugs and exclamations of how much she missed us. She bombarded me with questions about my trip, my parents, and how Mikey managed the journey. She wanted to know how work went while I was away. It seemed like Amy wanted to occupy every available moment to avoid discussing herself. That night, I finally managed to confront Amy. "Tell me, Amy, what's going on?" Amy acted as if she had no idea what I meant and tried to change the subject, but I persisted. "Jim got arrested. You were working with him. Tell me what's happening." Amy cupped my head in her hands, looking directly into my eyes and said, "Sweetie, I wish I could tell you everything. There are things that are bothering me, but I can't. There are internal and federal investigations going on, and we've been advised not to talk about anything, even with our spouses." That was convenient. While Amy still held my head and looked into my eyes, I asked, "Were you there when Jim was arrested?" Amy blinked at the question, and her grip on my head seemed to loosen slightly, but she held her position. "I'm sorry, honey, but I just can't talk about it. I promise. When I can, I'll tell you everything I can. I promise." She then tightly hugged me, resting her head on my shoulder. I could sense that she was holding back tears. We stayed like that, not saying anything, for a while. Then she let go of me and hurried into the bathroom, locking the door behind her. Amy had already prepared dinner, and I finished it. Amy finally came out, and we ate in silence. After dinner, Amy took my hand and asked if we could go to bed together. I followed her but made it clear, Amy, I'll go to bed with you, but don't expect anything from me. Amy didn't seem disappointed, actually. Her eyes showed relief. I understand, honey. I'd be happy if we could just cuddle. I need to be in your arms, feeling protected and loved. I need to know that I'm yours and you're mine. That's all I need, but I need it a lot. Despite my concerns about Amy being at Jim's house, I couldn't deny her. I loved Amy deeply, and cuddling would be just as satisfying for me as it would be for her. I needed to hold her and have her embrace me. Whatever worries I had were overshadowed by my need to be with Amy. We fell asleep. The next morning was similar. Amy nursed little Mikey, and I was once again amazed by the bond between a mother and her child. How could I question the mother of my son? And yet, I couldn't completely push aside the fact that Amy had some kind of connection to Jim, and she couldn't or wouldn't explain why she was at his house the morning of the arrest. Even if she was restricted from talking about her interactions with Jim, she was a cop, and I was a lawyer. There are ways to communicate without directly discussing specific events. It seemed clear to me that Amy was intentionally keeping something hidden. Though I had never kept any secrets from Amy, I decided that as long as she wasn't talking, I would keep my own little secret about the job offer in France. That Sunday night, Amy and I cuddled in bed. Amy didn't try to progress further. I held her from behind, spooning her. Amy turned her head and placed her hand behind my head as we shared a deep hug. I noticed both sadness and tears in her eyes. I used my finger to gently catch and wipe away her tears. Amy was silent for a while, but then said, "These tears are because I'm so happy with you and little Mikey." But why did her eyes reflect so much sadness, despite her expression of happiness? In the morning, Amy went to work, and I resumed my usual home routine of work and taking care of little Mikey. Late in the afternoon, I received a call from an unknown number. I usually ignored calls from unfamiliar numbers since they're often spam, but for some reason, I decided to answer this one. Michael Kruger. The caller then responded, "Mr. Kruger, we do not know each other, but I have something that you would find extremely valuable and important, and I want to share that with you. First, can you tell me who you are, and when you say valuable, it sounds to me like you are trying to sell me something." I was ready to hang up, but curiosity kept me on the line. "Mr. Kruger, I cannot identify myself for reasons that you will understand when you meet with me, and I am not selling anything, and I do not expect any money or favors from you. Rather, it is for your benefit to have this information, and it is even more important for you to have it. You will need to agree that you will never disclose that you had seen the information, and you certainly cannot tell anyone who I am. This needs to be very confidential, although you might need to share some part of this with Amy." I hadn't resolved my suspicions about the caller, but I agreed to meet. "Can we meet somewhere where there is privacy and a secure Wi-Fi?" I responded that the caller could come to my house the next day, as we would have privacy and a good secure internet connection. She suggested meeting at lunchtime, and we agreed. I gave her my address. That evening, Amy came home relatively early. She volunteered that with Jim's arrest, the task force was going through reorganization. I commented that it would be a shame if Jim's arrests resulted in relieving pressure on the criminals. Amy nodded in agreement but said nothing more. After putting the baby to sleep, Amy went to the bedroom and returned in a cute outfit that left little to the imagination. She wrapped her arms around me and whispered, "I know that you have a lot to do, but I really need your attention. Can we go to bed?" I wasn't in the mood, but it was hard to refuse such a request. I led her to our bed, and we shared a moment. I have to admit, I wasn't at my best, but Amy was holding me tight and hugging me with great passion, professing her love and desire to have more children and be together forever. Interestingly, for the second time in as many days, Amy whispered how she was mine and only mine, phrases she had never used before. The next day, Amy returned to work, and I resumed my roles as a lawyer and caretaker for Mikey. Around noon, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to see a young woman in business attire. She introduced herself as simply Geraldine. There's no need for last names in this case. She got straight to the point and asked if we could sit at a computer with internet access. Geraldine started, "You're probably wondering why I'm here. I won't play games. I am here because I strongly dislike your wife, and I want to hurt her." The worst punishment I can think of for Amy is to make you hate her. Unless you're into those strange stories that involve other people and relationships, I believe that what I am prepared to show you will make you hate your wife more than anything else. But first, I need your word that this stays between us, although I will provide you with some screenshots so you have proof when, as I expect, you confront Amy. But you must promise to never tell anyone about me or what you see here. Are we in agreement? I had no choice at this point. I had to know. Yes, I agree to keep this confidential between us. Geraldine then explained that she was the sister of a man Amy had pursued and caught for perpetuating an insurance fraud scheme. Apparently, there was a significant amount of money involved because her brother went to prison for several years. Geraldine had attended the entire trial and sentencing. She was convinced that Amy had exaggerated the facts to make her brother appear evil when it should have been seen as a small fraud scheme to support his family. Geraldine believed that Amy's testimony was what resulted in the long prison sentence. Geraldine now worked as a paralegal in the U.S. Attorney's Office. Keeping her married name, no one knew about her connection to her brother's case. Her current assignment was to work with the U.S. attorneys who were prosecuting Jim. She continued that, as part of the investigation and considering the government's connection to the Chinese government, the U.S. attorneys had obtained a 30-day warrant to place a video/audio feed in Jim's living room. The feed was activated by voice and motion and essentially turned on whenever someone entered the living room. The camera and microphone captured most of the living room and surrounding areas. As part of the warrant stipulations, the government had to have one person, not an attorney, review all the video-audio footage to delete any activities and save only sections that involved non-family members. Geraldine was the person responsible for going through the tapes of Jim's house to delete the irrelevant activities. So, as I was reviewing the tapes of the past couple of weeks, including the footage of the FBI arresting the D.A. in his home, I noticed something. I saw that Jim was entertaining a woman, and they were spending a lot of time together. That particular interaction wasn't of concern to the investigation, and I was about to permanently delete all the footage when the woman walked around the living room and started talking about the artwork on the wall. That's where the hidden camera and microphone were located. The woman basically looked into the hidden camera, and it was Amy's face and voice that stayed in my mind because she was the cop who put my brother away, your wife. I went back and compiled all the sections of the tapes that included your wife, uploaded it to a secure and safe site, and then deleted everything in the official database as the warrant required. The nightmare that I had feared was about to become a reality. My stomach churned and my heart raced. Can I see those tapes, please? Is your computer connected to the internet? Yes, and it's secure because I use a VPN for my business. Geraldine then took my keyboard and mouse and went through some steps to access a virtual database. So that you can follow along, your wife visited Jim on 3 separate nights over 5 days. I will show you the complete videos of all 3 days. Geraldine then clicked on File 1. Day 1, the video started playing. Jim and Amy were entering the house with takeout dinner bags. The entry was on the edge of the frame, but I could see Jim and Amy entering and taking off their shoes and socks. I guess Jim had a rule about shoes in the house. Jim opened a bottle of wine, poured a glass for Amy and himself, and they toasted before taking a sip. Jim then gently touched the side of Amy's cheek while they talked, but it was too quiet for the mic to pick up their words. They then separated, and Jim started preparing the takeout dinner. Meanwhile, Amy sat in one of the easy chairs in the living room, took out her phone, and made a call. "Hi, honey, just calling to check in and see if little Mikey is still awake to talk to Mommy." Amy was having wine in Jim's house while calling me and Mikey. The call was expected, but now it conveniently confirmed that I was still unaware of what was really happening. As always, the call ended with "I love you more." And Amy left her phone on the side table before returning to the dining area. There, they had a dinner like any other husband and wife would. They ate, drank wine, occasionally held hands, and talked about their day and plans. After finishing their meal, Amy picked up the plates and utensils and walked away, presumably to the sink, with Jim following. They disappeared from view, and their voices were too faint to understand. At that point, Jim helped Amy and carried her towards the room, out of view of the camera. The video ended there, as there was no more voice or motion captured. The next video was from the following morning. It was triggered by my morning call to Amy. Her phone was ringing on the side table where she had left it. After several rings, Amy appeared and answered the call. As always, the call ended with "I love you more." Although the video wasn't clear, I imagined that Amy still had the evidence of her actions with Jim, which would be seen as her secret, as she calmly talked to her oblivious husband and expressed her love. After the call, the video ended until Amy and Jim emerged dressed, made cups of coffee to go, and left. The last few seconds of the clip showed Amy hugging Jim goodbye. Day 2, the next clip, was actually 2 days later. Geraldine explained that Amy and Jim did not get together in the house the prior night. The Day 2 video began around 4 p.m. with a clip of Jim preparing dinner. A bit past 5 p.m., the doorbell rang, and Jim opened the door for Amy. The two hugged, and Amy again took off her shoes and socks as Jim had done previously. The two were in and out of the video range as apparently they were completing dinner together. Next, they sat down for dinner. Jim opened a bottle of wine, poured 2 glasses of wine, and then raised his glass with a toast, "May your dreams be fulfilled, Amy." Amy touched his glass with hers and responded, "To us indeed." During dinner, Jim asked, "What did you do last night?" "After work, I went with the guys to the pub. We had a good time, and I even did some darts. Then I went home and scrounged some leftovers to eat and thought." "Thought about what?" "Us. It was a beautiful night and wonderful morning. It was my last time here. It is a very difficult and confusing situation with Michael and little Mikey. I had to decide whether the other night was something that I wanted, and even if I wanted, whether it was a road that we wanted to take. I had to talk to someone, and so called my sister." "What did you tell her?" "I didn't give any details and did not say anything about our already having spent time together. But I told her the truth. I met someone for whom I have strong feelings. I think it is love, but maybe it is just infatuation, and maybe I am just wanting to feel the exhilaration of playing some dark secret game. I want to find out, but that would mean a potentially relationship." "Wow. So what did your sister respond when you told her you were considering this?" "She likes Michael and had always considered that he was a catch for me. She told me I was stupid to even consider going down this path of a new relationship. She warned me that it would be wrong, and if Michael ever found out, I should not expect any forgiveness or a stable family. She thought the risk-benefit analysis was totally against pursuing this, but then my sister had to admit that she could not fully understand the depth of my feelings for you or Michael. So what did you decide after all that?" Amy almost nonchalantly responded, "I am here, aren't I?" Listening to the conversation sunk me lower than I could have expected. What I was about to see was not some impulsive action under the influence of alcohol or drugs, or thoughtless action. This was Amy acting intentionally and understanding the risks and benefits before making a decision. That effect of that decision did not take long to become apparent. After eating and removing the dinnerware, Jim led Amy to the fireplace where he started the gas logs. Of course, there was a fireplace. Jim reached out for Amy, but Amy resisted and grabbed her phone. "I need to do this first." Amy then called my phone to talk to little Mikey and then have a brief conversation with me. I ended the conversation with the usual "I love you," and she responded, "Love you more." Amy did not indicate any concerns about her sister's warnings or talking with her husband and son immediately before being with another man. Amy put down the phone and sat next to Jim on the faux bear rug in front of the fireplace. After having a good time together, the two took a break to get another glass of wine and some water. They talked about various things that lovers share when nothing needs to be said, as their connection had made everything clear. They shortly resumed their special time. Eventually, the two drank more water and went to the bedroom. The next clip was almost a copy of the prior morning clip. I had called and Amy grabbed the phone that she left in the living room. This was the call where I had asked if Amy could possibly come up to my parents so that she could spend a little time with them, see her son, and then we could return together. I now knew exactly how Amy was occupied when she had responded to my invitation with, "I am so sorry, honey, but I just have too many things on my plate, and I just do not have time for this trip." Her last words were again, "I love you more." During the call, however, Jim came by and tried to place his arms around Amy, but she forcefully pushed his arms away and deliberately stepped away from him. Jim looked a bit stunned. After the telephone call ended, Amy told Jim, "What you and I have is something separate from Michael and me. Michael is a good person and a wonderful husband and father to my son. When we are together, it is you and me. But when I am with Michael either physically or on a call, I am his. And you may not disrespect him by touching me, even if Michael cannot see anything. The boundaries of the two relationships can never be crossed. Jim quickly apologized and promised to always respect the boundaries that Amy demanded. The two hugged to seal their agreement, and then hugged more and held each other. That woman certainly has her view of life all so nicely ordered and compartmentalized. The last entry for that morning was Jim asking whether Amy would come over that night. Amy would not. You have me pretty sore, tiger, and I need to recover. And besides, I need to take a break and think. She then turned to Jim and sweetly smiled. But then I think that the best idea may be not to think about it. The two left for work, with Jim saying, "I love you." Amy just hugged Jim but said nothing. Day 3, Geraldine now played the clips of the third day. I was fast-forwarding some of the video, just as I had done with the prior videos. The video started with Jim again getting dinner together, and as before, Amy came into the house. The two hugged, as Amy removed her shoes and socks. Amy then asked, "So what's for dinner today?" After a while, the two left the rug and quickly ate their dinner with a glass of wine. After cleaning up, Amy was walking around picking up their clothes when Jim grabbed a pillow from the couch and threw at Amy. Little Mikey was now crying, and I had to change his diaper and feed him a bottle of expressed milk. Geraldine understood and hung around. "Geraldine, I have seen enough. I don't need to see any more. You said you would provide me with some screenshots, and I would ask for that, please. I had already made selected copies of images when I was going through that. I just downloaded them on your computer and checked that they work. You have what you need. I hope that our paths never cross again, because that would mean we are both in trouble. But if you need anything on this, please contact me, discreetly of course." With that, Geraldine saw herself out. I was holding little Mikey and crying on the inside at the vicious curve life threw me in the last weeks. Rectification, I needed to think. It was clear that this is not just about getting close. In fact, if Amy merely had an experience while she was drunk or high, I would have not only forgiven her, but would have viewed the fling as much more than a typical challenge that we had to overcome in our happy marriage path. I might even have considered continuing the marriage if Amy had a brief fling to satisfy a need for experimentation or perhaps to help with work. Neither threatened the basis of our marriage. The literature is full of stories of reconciliation, and so plainly people believe that working through infidelity is possible. Amy's relationship with Jim, however, was far more than a fling. The video showed a deep bond between Amy and Jim. There was true emotion when she initiated the deep, loving hugs. It crossed my mind that Amy may have simply taken the opportunity to enjoy a bit of extracurricular activity because I was not around. But then it would have been just some fun, and not the caring loving that I saw. I was sick to my stomach and angry. I wanted to strike out against the people involved. But I knew I had to think logically before acting. The biggest factor here was little Mikey. A divorce would separate him from his mother and father, and regardless of proof of infidelity, mothers automatically gain primary custody of a baby unless there are other circumstances that I cannot prove. The consequences of a divorce were such that I had to be careful because if I upset Amy, she could divorce me and I would lose Mikey once again. As I thought about it, I realized that securing custody of Mikey was my top priority. Everything else was secondary. I was almost certain that Amy would never agree to share custody with me. On the other hand, I didn't believe that the person who destroyed our marriage deserved to retain custody, and I genuinely believed that I could provide a better upbringing for Mikey. I needed him. I was certain that Amy would be very accommodating with visitation rights if she got custody. Indeed, she might even encourage frequent visits because it would free up her time. But I wanted full custody. One option would be to continue my marriage with Amy and attempt to keep her satisfied to avoid her asking for a divorce. However, that was not a game that I wanted to play, and I could never be sure that Amy wouldn't cheat again. But with every problem comes an opportunity for a solution. A plan began to form in my mind. There would be multiple steps involved, but nothing that couldn't be synchronized. The first step was to email the French company and accept their offer. I would also request to start as soon as possible, as it would be a convenient time for me to shift my responsibilities to other lawyers in my firm. I asked that the company find suitable housing for me on at least a short-term basis, and, very importantly, find a suitable caretaker for Mikey. Next, I called my mother and asked if it would be possible for her to look after Dad while she flew to France for a few days where I would meet her. To say she was shocked or surprised is an understatement, especially when I told her that I had visual proof of Amy's affair and would be moving to France while divorcing Amy. I explained that I needed her in France because little Mikey would need someone to be with him for a day or two, and she was the only one I truly trusted. She said she would talk to Dad and see what could be done. Next, I started an emergency expedited process to obtain passports for both Mikey and Amy. I scheduled a meeting with the managing partner for the next day after hours. I also arranged for a phone conference with a family lawyer who owed me a favor. I asked her to find out what was involved in custody disputes when a child resides in France with one parent and the other parent is here. I began to review our finances and tried to pay off all our credit card and other debts. The next day, I would go to a bank and open a checking account in my name only. I reviewed my 401k plans and the logistics of dividing our investment accounts. Finally, I made sure that all my personal and professional files were stored in the cloud and that I could access them from my laptop computer. The next step was one I hated to do because it would involve being deceitful and defrauding Amy. Perhaps she deserved to be deceived as she had deceived me. But while Amy had withheld information from me, she had never lied. However, I had no choice but to be dishonest. I had to get little Mikey to France, and that couldn't be accomplished without Amy coming as well. There was simply no way for one parent to take an infant out of the country without certified permission. When Amy came home, I told her that I needed to go to France for work, and I wanted her and little Mikey to come with me. Amy didn't seem too interested, but I challenged her. Amy, we seemed to be growing apart. Our phone conversations while I was away felt distant. I understand that you can't talk about it, but I worry about what you're not telling me about Jim. I think we need to get away, even for a little bit, and reconnect. Amy had no reason to suspect that I knew about her secret time with Jim, but I was telling Amy that she needed to ease my concerns. Knowing she was guilty, I expected that Amy would go to great lengths to keep me unaware. Amy then mentioned that she had just been summoned to testify before a grand jury investigating the D.S. activities and that it would be in 10 days. She seemed visibly nervous about the testimony. While anyone called to a grand jury would be anxious, in this case Amy had the added burden of possibly having to lie under oath about her relationship with Jim. The subpoena was a stroke of luck. I tried to turn it to my advantage. Amy, I am a lawyer. I tell you that the best thing you can do is to get away from everyone and everything before testifying. Let's go away. And you come back the day before you testify. You won't have to think about the grand jury, and you will not be surrounded by people and places that will simply stress you out. Let's do it. For your sake, my sake, and for Mikey. After further discussion, Amy emailed her superiors her intention to take 4 vacation days the following week, which she needed because of the stress of the events, with assurances that she would return in time to testify. In the next days, we prepared for our trip, while I also prepared for my leaving town. I met with my partners at the firm and arranged to transition my work to others, as well as negotiate various financial aspects of leaving a practice. I met with the divorce lawyer and arranged to file for divorce after Amy had testified. My mother called back to say that Dad had ordered her to go to France. Between visiting nurses and neighbors, there would always be someone for Dad. Things were moving along, but I still had to live with Amy and pretend that I knew nothing. It was not that hard, as Amy herself was fairly depressed and not interested in talking or doing anything. Although it was not something we could talk about, I guessed that Amy was concerned that she did not know what the feds knew about her relationship with Jim. She could testify truthfully and hope that the secrecy of the grand jury prevailed, but it was most unlikely that such intriguing information could be kept a secret. She could lie under oath, but twisting justice was risky and against everything she stood for. Amy was also no doubt angry at herself for falling into a relationship with a simple criminal who was willing to help the country's enemy. Or maybe she was still in love with Jim and hurting that he was in prison and would likely spend most of his remaining adult life there. I casually thought that Amy was feeling guilty about having cheated on me and her son, but if she ever thought about that, I suspected that she would rationalize her actions as being limited to a different Jim Amy world where I did not exist. Seeing her depressed, I sometimes wish that I could hug her in my arms and tell her that everything will be fine, but I could not lie like that. France, I was able to get the expedited passports just in time. The flight to Paris was uneventful, with little Mikey generally being good and sleeping a lot. We cleared customs and I picked up our car rental and drove us to a small hotel in a village on Paris outskirts. It was late afternoon and Amy had just nursed the baby, and the three of us went to get some dinner. I wished that I did not have to bring the baby for this, but we could not leave him alone or with some stranger. Thankfully, the baby would not be able to understand anything. After dinner, I acquired a bottle of apple juice and a couple glasses and took Amy to a quiet sitting area outside our hotel. Amy, just before we left for France, I learned something dreadful. How did it begin? Amy looked at me with eyes wide open. Her mouth was moving as if trying to say something, but no words formed and no sound was heard. Amy, I know all about you and Jim, including the 3 nights that you spent in his home. But I do not know why. I do not understand your motivation for abandoning your family or how you saw this play out. Maybe you can say something that will make it better because I don't think anything could get worse. Please be honest. Amy now had a shocked look on her face. My references to spanking and her calling as a masseuse clearly told her that I had somehow witnessed everything. Tears were forming in her eyes. She started to cry. Suddenly she ran back to the hotel. I just sat and sipped my apple juice. About 10 minutes. Later, Amy returned and tentatively sat next to me. How did you find out? I can't tell you. But if you want, I can show you images of you and Jim, although there is no point. We both know what you did. My only question is why. Amy remained quiet for a minute, but then slowly started to answer. We worked together closely. Jim listened to all my ideas and proposals and criticisms. We talked. We bantered sometimes to silliness while discussing some aspect of the case. I told you that we went to lunch just the 2 of us. He used to hold my hand at these lunches, and we talked about everything. I wanted to remain faithful and thought I could always stop before crossing the line, but we became very close. I started to like him very much. I admired and respected him tremendously. Then one day we had a huge breakout event. We did a warrant search on a house and found a huge load of information and were able to arrest the owner and perpetrator. I had been instrumental in identifying the house and the perpetrator. When we got back to our task force station, Jim was there to greet and thank us. He called me into an office to get information regarding the arrest and closed the door. Once inside, Jim gave me a congratulatory hug. I somehow automatically reciprocated and put my arms around him, and it felt comfortable. He then stood back a little with our arms still around another and looked into my eyes and I into his. Was this before I went to see my dad? I guess the day before. I guess I did not notice anything. You weren't supposed to. What Jim and I did had nothing to do with you and me. Nothing to do with me. You didn't think you were betraying me. I never wanted to betray you. I actually thought that this might be a single event to never repeat. Yet my hug with Jim felt so natural and so good and so right. I was confused, nervous, eager, uncertain, excited, a mix of different emotions. The next morning, I actually planned on avoiding any situations where Jim and I were alone. I guess that you did not follow through with your plan? My plan did not survive my meeting Jim the next day. We went to a funeral of a prior chief of police. There were so many law enforcement groups and other people. That took us to the end of the day. We ran across some out-of-town officers who had to stay the night, and Jim and I took them to dinner. It was surreal. I felt as if Jim and I were a married couple going out with friends. But I fully intended the evening to be just dinner. But then we sat at the table looking at each other. I saw only his lips moving, the same lips that had given me great happiness the day before. I knew I had to leave right then, but my legs could not move, and my mouth could not form a goodbye. After dinner, after the others had gone on their way with a lot of gratitude for taking them out, Jim and I went outside, and he gave me a hug, and it was over. I was going home with him. Did you consider us your husband and your son at all? I am embarrassed to say that when I was with Jim, I was no longer a wife or a mother. I was just a woman wanting to be with her lover. There was this attraction between us, and I could not stop it. I just rationalized that my family and Jim were just two separate parts of my life having nothing to do with each other. I was not enough for you. After Jim's arrest, I have been reflecting on what I did with him and why. It is not true that you were inadequate in any way, or not completely true. You are a good, faithful husband and father. I was perfectly happy with our love life. But your goodness was also the problem. So you became close with Jim? No, definitely not. Jim became infatuated with me. He then really pursued me. He was a hunter and I was his target. Jim always said the right thing and made me feel special. I did not respond well to his pursuit. I respected and admired Jim. Jim was charming, powerful, sort of my superior, and he had plenty of time to work on me. I can see those lunches now as acts of pursuit. God, I wish now that I had listened to you when you warned me about my private lunches with him. But I didn't listen. I let him slowly take up more and more of my time, and so he made himself my work husband. In fact, I was spending more time with Jim than with you. So being Jim's work wife and being with him ultimately seemed natural. I now realize that I had deceived myself and never really stepped back and analyzed my growing relationship with Jim. I had to admire Amy's self-reflection and honesty. I sat silently trying to absorb what Amy just explained, or confessed I did not even know how to categorize. Amy then continued, "Honey, I will tell you everything. I will answer every question as completely and truthfully as I can. I will do that because I know that any doubt or feeling that you don't know everything will be an impediment to your ability to forgive me. I will need to convince you to trust me at least a little. I have my work cut out for me. I hope, however, that you will find it in your heart to forgive me at some point, and so I will share everything with you. I will be shaming myself with every answer, but I will do anything to earn that forgiveness. From what I saw, your feelings for Jim were far stronger than they were for me. I don't think that is true. I hope it isn't true. I love you, honey, very much, and I love our child, and those feelings are strong. My feelings for Jim were different. Even when I was with Jim, the intensity of my attraction to Jim scared me, the romantic nature of it surprised me, and the combination of the two confused me. But I never saw that as impacting what you and I had. Why could you have thought it would not impact? You did things with Jim that you never did with me. You were a different, far more affectionate person with Jim than you had ever been with me. You were more loving with Jim than you had ever been with me. You were giving Jim something that you would never give to me. How could that not impact us? Amy just stared at me. Her lips began to quiver. Perhaps she recognized for the first time the truth of what she had given Jim but withheld from me. Maybe it was my fault for not being more proactive with Amy, not pushing the envelope with her. But it was Amy, not Jim, that pulled his belt and started the playful spankings that I could never have foreseen her doing at all, or at least with me. She started massaging Jim, even though she had never offered anything similar to me. She volunteered with Jim, but not with me. Amy now started to cry. Suddenly, she got up and ran to our room. I followed her and saw that she was in the bathroom crying. I just grabbed my laptop and went down to the sitting area near the reception desk, signed on the internet, checked emails, and pretended to do some work. By the time I went back to the room, Amy was asleep, or at least pretended to be asleep. As we had previously planned, we were up early. We didn't talk. Amy took care of the baby while I dressed to go to work. Amy should have the rental car, and so a coworker picked me up. After a long day of meetings, I was brought home. Amy was outside on one of the benches, with the baby sleeping in her arms. Amy's face was sad and her eyes empty. I suspected she had cried during the day. "Hi, honey, how were your meetings?" "Went okay. Just a lot of stuff to do. The baby is fed, but I have not eaten. I thought we might go out together to a restaurant for dinner." That was fine with me, and after changing, the three of us went to dinner. I still wanted some more answers. "Amy, when you talked about your time with Jim being something separate from our family, the thought occurred to me that we never discussed what marriage meant to us." Amy looked at me, nodded, and wanted me to continue. "I view marriage as a lifelong commitment to a partnership where we shared our lives to the exclusion of all others. The key word is partnership. Our interests would be fused, and as in any partnership, you could not unilaterally give any part of the partnership to another. Neither of us could share the fused oneness of our bodies and our souls with anyone else. Michael, I don't think that I gave away anything of ours to Jim. I was with him on my own free time and only when you were unavailable. I never stopped loving you as my husband. You lost nothing, and so I could not have given away anything of ours. Amy, think about it. Did Jim know that you slept with me? Of course he knew. We are married, and I told Jim that, if anything, I had to be more open to you make you happy. Ah, yes, pity love. No, not pity love. You are my husband and the father of our child, and you have always been there for me. I have always loved you and never wanted us to be apart. We will get back to that, Amy. But you told Jim about us, what we did together, didn't you? Yes, Jim always wanted to talk about us. You little boys are always in competition, and Jim wanted to win whatever game it is that you little boys play. I didn't say much beyond that you kept me perfectly happy. But you did talk to an outsider about your partner and the partnership. Forgetting the closeness, you were disclosing partnership secrets to an outsider. How do you think I should feel about you telling Jim everything while keeping secrets from me? When you shared our secrets with Jim but kept Jim's secrets from me, who were you treating as your husband? It is true that Jim and I kept a secret from you, but I could not tell you because I love you and I knew that telling you about Jim would hurt you, and I did not want to cause you any pain. I kept the secret as much for you as for myself. You are such a loving wife indeed. Amy grimaced and was about to say something, but then bit her tongue. I continued. I saw you with Jim. I saw you play a game with him. These were actions that I never saw. Why Jim and not me? Amy was quiet for a bit, thinking. I don't have an answer. I told you before that I did not feel comfortable in letting you see that side of me. Maybe I felt freer because I was already cheating and might as well let everything go. But, Michael, if I had the opportunity, I would happily do everything and anything you wanted. You were never less important than anyone else. How can you say I was never less important when it was more important for you to be with Jim than it was to remain faithful to me? I don't want you to answer me now, but I want you to give some thought to this question. If Jim had not been arrested, wouldn't you have continued your relationship with Jim? And if you did, wouldn't there have at least been the strong possibility that you would have so fallen in love with him that you would choose to divorce me and marry him? If you say that nothing like that would have happened, how do you know? And how would I ever know that you would have chosen me over Jim? I can't really comprehend the pain that you must have experienced if you saw Jim and me together. You are right that I was acting in a way that was not true to myself and did things with Jim that I never had done with you. Please understand that this just followed my stupid thinking that the whole affair was just me being anti-Amy, being the opposite of what I was and should have been. It was stupid, it was selfish, it was wrong. Find a word describing unforgivable conduct, and I was guilty of that. But it was the opposite of who I really am, not the real me. But the opposite side of you is part of you. There was a moment of silence. Neither of us desired to continue the conversation. After we undressed and washed up, we went to our separate beds. I started to read a book to calm down. It was a history book, and although I liked the subject, reading history or science tends to make me drowsy very quickly. But then, a few minutes into my reading, I saw Amy get out of bed and drop her robe to expose a stylish nightgown. She quickly crossed the distance to my bed and forced herself next to me. As long as you have the light turned on, I can't fall asleep, honey. I want you to continue reading or doing whatever you wish, but can I just lie here next to you until you turn off the light? Amy's gesture was not really unexpected. My mind was fighting with my desires. She was enticing as any person could be, and my desires were urging me to take advantage of the situation because I didn't know when I would have an opportunity like this again. Amy looked into my eyes and sensed my internal struggle. Please let me do something for you. It doesn't have to mean anything. Her right hand was now caressing the bed covering. I knew that if I gave in to Amy, I would feel gratified in the moment, but I would regret it afterward. I gently moved her right hand away and nudged Amy off the bed. You should get some sleep. I am turning off the light and going to sleep. I could hear Amy sniffling as she returned to her bed. I doubt either one of us slept well. The next morning, one of my future colleagues at the company picked me up and took me to the office. I was generally successful in focusing on what I needed to do. After returning to the hotel, Amy was again nursing the baby. I again saw the love between the mother and child, but also had flashes of Jim's presence, and the memories made my heart ache. I changed into more comfortable clothes. After the baby had been taken care of, we went to dinner at a local restaurant to enjoy the food. It was not a place where anyone seemed to speak English, so we had some privacy. I ordered, and the server brought a carafe of red wine for us to share. After pouring our glasses, Amy raised hers to mine and gave a toast. Here is to us, whether we are together as I hope, or at least individually if we cannot. I returned the toast, we will be. And what will we be, my love? Referring to me as my love is the question and answer. I both loved you and was in love with you. I would have sacrificed anything for you. But as we talked yesterday, I felt that because we were partners and I thought that you loved me, perhaps not as much as I loved you, but still wanted to be my true partner. I could live with that. I took a deep breath in silence, which Amy quickly interrupted. But I love you and I am in love with you. Nothing has changed in my feelings for you. You have nailed the problem you just confessed, my dear detective, that you care about me today as much as you did when you were involved with Jim. You say I care about you in the same way you say good morning. I don't think you understand the meaning of the word. Caring means acting not for yourself but for your partner. It requires putting their needs before your own. You acted in Jim's best interest, not mine. Therefore, it's clear that you care about Jim, not me, just like you kept secrets from me and not from Jim. You don't care about me, but Jim. "Noo-oo," Amy screamed. That got the attention of everyone in the restaurant. The young server quickly came to our table, thinking perhaps I was hurting my wife. I apologized and explained that we were having a discussion. Amy was now visibly crying. I thought about leaving the restaurant, but we had already ordered, and the food would be coming shortly. "Amy, please compose yourself, or we can leave now and skip dinner. Please." Amy replied, "I want us to finish our talk. Let's stay. I will try not to raise my voice again. I kept Jim a secret to avoid hurting you. I let my guilt eat me up inside, but I wasn't going to tell you about Jim just to relieve myself of the guilt. Did you feel guilty when you calmly ended our phone conversation with 'I care about you' while you were still in bed with Jim? Words are easy. Actions hold true meaning and consequences. I am truly sorry for what I did. I know these are just words, but in the midst of my infatuation, I thought I was being fair to both of us because I didn't take anything away from you. You once again claim that you took nothing away, but a real partnership in the legal world requires honesty and that partners act in good faith. You knew that I was committed to you, and our partnership required your commitment to me. But you broke that trust and gave me a raw deal. You shared secrets in moments that were meant for us alone, not to be shared with an outsider. You purposely hurt me to satisfy your own desires. It's clear that you do not care about me. I don't know if I can convince you otherwise. I didn't think. I was foolish and made a mistake, but if you truly cared about me and were willing to do anything for me, as you claimed, why can't you forgive me for that stupidity? Why can't you sacrifice for me by giving me the chance to prove to you that I can be a good wife and mother? The Bible teaches about God's love for sinners and the importance of forgiving those who have hurt you. I have forgiven you, Amy, but love is a choice and an emotion. To me, love between a husband and wife and their partnership are deeply intertwined. One cannot exist without the other. When you betrayed our partnership with Jim, you also betrayed the love I had for you. So even though I understand that you were infatuated and now feel remorse, and I forgive you, there is no longer a partnership, and it's unrealistic to think that a marriage can thrive without one. Amy seemed to have thought hard about what she wanted to say. Michael, I sense that you feel there's no hope for us, but I beg you, and if I didn't want to cause a scene, I would literally get on my knees right now. I want to plead with you to give us another chance. I've spent a lot of time reflecting on what I've done to you and to our marriage. It's difficult to comprehend, but I don't think I was fully in control. I felt like everything I did was inevitable. I didn't feel like I had a choice. My logical thinking just shut down. I was lured in and controlled by overpowering emotions. I admit that I was self-centered and made many mistakes. I lost perspective. I didn't see Jim for who he truly was and didn't grasp the foolishness of my actions. I failed to see the importance of our partnership that you mentioned. Instead, I held onto an irrational belief that you and Jim were separate worlds, which I now realize was wrong. It was infatuation. I didn't see the truth before, but I see it now. Now that I have the knowledge, I can resist those feelings. I have grown and matured from this experience. I can be the wife you've always wanted, and we have a future together. I understand where you're coming from. I believe you described something that some people call limerence. You can look it up on Google. It's a period of intense emotions and excitement that can lead to an uncontrollable obsession for another person. It may even have a basis in neuroscience. You enjoyed your first hug with Jim, perhaps partly because you knew it was wrong. But then your brain wanted more, and the more you indulged, the more you craved, a typical self-reinforcing dopamine reaction. But understanding this doesn't solve my concerns. Some of it is practical. I can't erase what I saw. Those images will always be in my mind whenever I look at you, just like I'm picturing the images of you with Jim as we speak. Is it fair for either of us to live with that burden? My dearest Michael, maybe over time, you will focus more on us and the images of Jim and me will fade from your mind. We have our beautiful son who will always connect us. We can build on that. Is there any way out? It's difficult to envision a way out. Your affair happened just 2 weeks ago, and it would have continued if Jim hadn't been arrested. I think these recent events may have matured you, but we can't rely on such a sudden change in a person. You may be a faithful wife from now on, but will it always be a struggle for you? Forcing someone to be good isn't what we should strive for in life. You don't have the same care for me that I had for you because my care for you was selfless. I always wanted to do things for you, not for what love could do for me. Your self-centeredness prevented that kind of care. Have you truly changed so quickly? We returned to the hotel room, saying very little because there wasn't much more to say. The end game the next morning was when I made a difficult decision. I woke up early before Amy, went to little Mikey's crib, and carefully changed his diaper before gathering all his things. I quietly opened the door, slipped out, and placed the baby in my car. I drove him to another hotel some distance away. That's where I had arranged for my mother to be. She was already waiting for me at the hotel entrance. We took little Mikey to her room, where I left him in her care. I had barely walked out of the room when I saw Amy calling. Yes, she woke up and noticed that I was missing, but more importantly, she wondered where her baby was. I told her that he was with me and that I would be returning shortly. I reminded Amy that she had a flight that day and should start packing. When I returned to our room, Amy immediately asked, "Where's my baby?" "He's with my mother. He's safe." "What? Your mother? What's going on?" "I need little Mikey. He needs me." "Amy, please sit down and take some deep breaths. In an hour, a car will arrive to take you to the airport. You'll be returning, but little Mikey and I are staying here." "What? Staying for how long?" "We're staying here permanently. I've accepted a job here with the client I was meeting, and the baby will be with me." Amy was shaking her head vigorously, but she seemed too shocked to say anything. "Amy, please listen. I don't feel good about this, but it had to be done. Your affair destroyed our family. One of us would have custody of the baby, and the other would suffer the loss. I don't want to do this, but I won't lose my son because of your actions. If you think about it, taking little Mikey is fair. The guilty party shouldn't benefit, and the innocent should be protected." Amy was now sobbing and screaming, "Knew you." She was wildly swinging her fists, but she was too distraught to make any real impact. "You can't take my baby. I'll call the police. I'll take you to court." To prevent her from hurting herself, I wrapped my arms around her and tried to calm her down. I needed her to get on the plane, and that required a little tender, loving care. "Amy, I'm sorry, but you know there's no other choice. You can call the police, but they won't do anything. They'll see that I'm the father and that the baby is with me. They won't hand him over to you to take back to the States. You can fight for custody later in court, but it'll be difficult, especially since I have Mikey and we're in a different country where I can start my own legal proceedings. Amy, I don't want to hurt you, but if you push the issue, I may have no choice but to fight dirty and show the videos of you with Jim, especially since he was under a federal investigation. Do you want that?" "I'd hate to resort to that, but I'll do whatever it takes to not lose my son." She didn't know that I could never share the videos. Amy was now on her knees, clinging to my legs, crying, "Please don't take my baby from me, please." I sat on the floor with her and once again hugged her tightly. "Amy, you're not a bad person or a bad mother. I'm not taking our son away from you. You'll always be his mother and you can visit him whenever you come back to France. But I can't let you have custody because you need to face the consequences of your actions. This is the best I can do. But how often can I come to France? He won't remember me. I won't be his mommy anymore." Amy was still crying, but now she also wrapped her arms around me and rested her head on my chest. I was still considering whether to bring up the option my mother had suggested. Maybe there was a way for one mother to support another. What I'm doing now is one option. Your mother-in-law has asked me to consider another option which I'm not sure I can accept, but I'll tell you for my mother's sake. Do you want to hear it? Yes, of course. Anything. Try not to get your hopes up too high, but my mother thinks that, even though your actions with Jim were heartbreaking, hurtful, selfish, and horrible, you might have been tempted and not in the right mindset. Maybe it's just a difference between men and women. Anyway, the option is for you to prove your commitment by leaving the police force and moving to France permanently. I'm not sure if resigning alone would prove much other than giving up your career to be with Mikey. But on the other hand, Mikey would have his mother full-time, which is something I'm considering. I want our baby to have his mother. Under this option, would we still be married and living together? Yes. But I want to be clear. Living together doesn't necessarily mean we'll have a traditional husband and wife relationship. For example, I don't fully trust you right now, so we would need some security measures to ensure you can't take Mikey back to the States. How can we have a true marriage when there's so much distrust? We would be more like friends than partners. But again, Mikey would have his mother, and maybe we can find a way to make things more friendly and get back to some sense of normal. Amy whispered, "It sounds like this option requires me to sacrifice myself. Become a virtual worker." Two things. First, remember, you used to joke with Jim that he was your boss, so maybe there's some truth to that. And secondly, both options ask a lot from you. But you're the one who broke our partnership. Fixing the problem comes with a cost. So your solution is to take my son and then manipulate me into giving up custody. Did I create this monster or did I just awaken something evil in you, Michael? The options aren't ideal, but they're necessary. Amy, please remember that you destroyed our family. I can't lose my son because of your selfish actions. If one of us has to suffer the loss of Mikey, it should be you since you're the one who broke the partnership and caused the problem. Amy started to speak, but I interrupted. Amy, let's continue this conversation when you're back in the States, after you've testified and had time to think about it. Nothing will happen in the meantime. But if you go out with Jim or another man in the meantime, even my mother won't suggest the reconciliation option. Please understand that. Amy's face twitched with stress, and her voice sounded defeated. I promise that the only men in my life will be you and our son. She tried to force a smile. I helped her pack her bags and we brought them to the car that would take her to the airport.